Hi everyone, and welcome to the Eternia Productions YouTube channels. I just have a few guidelines that I'd like to say about this channel and the series, Myself and Disabilities. My Life in Disabilities. Firstly, that please no hurtful, insensitive or inappropriate comments about me, myself or any potential future contributors. This is about disabilities, and the whole point of this series is to raise awareness of my disabilities, which brings me on to point two. I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, particularly with Asperger's syndrome and autism. No two cases are the same, so I'm not claiming to be a spokesperson on behalf of the whole autistic and Asperger's and dyspraxia community. And three, feel free to ask any questions. If you have any questions about any of my disabilities, then feel free to put a comment below. So the first point I'll be talking about, the first question I'm going to say in this first episode is, what are my disabilities? So I have Asperger's syndrome and dyspraxia. Asperger's syndrome is part of the autism spectrum disorder, which is a group of disabilities that include Asperger's syndrome, autism, and ADHD, and many more. They're most disabilities are now recently diagnosed underneath, just as classed as autism spectrum disorder. Me personally, I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old. The reason that my mum found out that I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and dyspraxia is that I wasn't meeting certain key developmental milestones compared to other children. The first disability I'm going to talk about is Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's syndrome belongs on the autistic spectrum. For me personally, throughout my life, the way the disability affected me, especially in early on in my life, was difficulties reading body language and socializing, like picking up social cues. Also, I do struggle with taking things literally. So, for example, if something says, for example, in cooking, if something says, you need 2 sausages, 2 potatoes, cook it for 5 minutes, I'll follow those instructions to the letter. Although sometimes I do experiment with cooking, so especially like during university. I know early on that first time I cooked, I followed the instructions to the letter, and although the meal was nice, it took probably a long time rather than, say, instead of cooking it in the oven, like cook it in a frying pan or under the grill or something. So it took longer than I needed to. Asperger's syndrome also involves, like, in particular for me, like, get certain hobbies and interests, which I think is a big element of having Asperger's syndrome and autism. So for me personally, I've always been a massive fan of Doctor Who, like from the first time I was shown an episode, and I still am. I like going to theme parks. I like going to, more recently, musicals, and I like following them and learning about them. I know different people with Asperger's syndrome and autism have different specialist interests, which it's always good to encourage people personally and support them with their interests. Like my mum and my family, they've been very supportive of any hobbies and interests I have, which I'll talk about in a later video, like specifically how I've embraced my hobbies, collected things to do with them, and like how I've sort of developed my own hobbies as well, such as writing my short stories based off of those interests. Another aspect of Asperger's syndrome and autism is that we're quite susceptible to sensory stimulation. So what that means is, for me personally, is that I do get more affected by bright lights and loud noises. So, for example, I know I can see like if the light's really bright, it does affect me. So I can sometimes get more susceptible to headaches. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can do, especially if lights are looking directly like in me. Uh, what else? Oh, noises as well. So if there's a building site, or and I'm standing right next to it, or if I'm next to a speaker that's really loud, uh, then it can be overwhelming sometimes. So something I learnt more recently as well about Asperger's syndrome and autism is that insomnia is actually a link to it. So I do personally have trouble sleeping. I tend to wake up early during the night and then have trouble getting back to sleep again. Uh, so it's a condition that I think you learn more about as you go along in life. Like at different stages throughout your life, you learn of different aspects that are involved in the disabilities. Which reminds me, another thing that I'm absolutely about to class as one of my specialist interests is animals. Like I've always grown up with dogs and cats, guinea pigs, rabbits, fish, rats. So I always enjoy going to zoos and learning more about animals. And I think like going in the future, I'll always live in a household with dogs and pets or some kind of animal because I've always grown up with it. And like as they say, like you look after the animals like become part of your family, and I do believe that like my own pets are part of my own family. Also, just to let you know, this is my first ever YouTube video, so sorry if it's not as polished as like other YouTube videos. It's the first time I've ever done something like this. I've wanted to do it for a while, but it's just been a case of building my confidence up to do it. So another thing that I can say that I'll go into more details in future videos is about Asperger's syndrome is that anxiety and if you're stressed can come out in a physical response. So for me personally, if I'm anxious or stressed, then I can either like bounce my leg up and down, and also like what helps calm me down is if I've got a pen or something in my hand, then it like relieves some of the stress and anxiety as well. So the other disability I have is dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is a condition that affects your hand-eye coordination. So again, I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old. Uh, it means I'm naturally more clumsy than other people. I do struggle with certain physical activities such as tying shoelaces. I mainly wear Velcro shoes, or I have pre-tied shoelaces that are made specifically for people who struggle with their hand-eye coordination. I've never been able to ride a bike. So I did try when I was younger, but it's something that I struggled with, especially without stabilizers. Also, it can affect me walking as well. That sometimes uh, I can just like struggle to walk in a straight line. Sometimes like through no fault of my own, it just happens. When I was younger, I had to be taught how to use a knife and fork because at the time I didn't know when I was a child, and like it's not like I learnt with a occupational therapist just to help build up basic hand-eye coordination skills. So that's enabled me to now do things that other people might take for granted, such as do buttons up on a shirt, like even shave and like and things like that. Really. So some things I'll talk about in the future video about coping strategy. But one thing with my dyspraxia that recently, in the last couple of years or so, that helped me with learning to drive, and hopefully I'll be able to take my test soon, is that uh, I now have an automatic car, and I learned to drive in an automatic car because I was having like problems changing through the gears. Because even though I knew where the gears were, they like doing it with my hand and like it was causing more difficulties. So I made a decision a couple of years ago, which helped me a lot really, and hopefully I'll be able to pass my test to do automatic because then the car takes care of it for me. So it's never a bad thing, especially if you have disabilities. to make your life easier. It's not a failure at all. It's just helping you and taking an element of stress and removing it from your life. So another thing about my dyspraxia is that it does affect my handwriting. Um, so even though, and I do have difficulty reading it myself, so throughout my life I've tried to use digital devices, laptops, tablets, and things as much as possible because my handwriting it's not the best. It can be quite hard to read. It's not very legible, even though I put a lot of effort into trying to make it readable. It sometimes just doesn't work. So if I use a computer or if I use a tablet, then it just makes it easier for me to read what I've written, as well as making it easier for me to for other people to be able to read and try and get across what I'm trying to say. And also with both conditions, Asperger's syndrome and dyspraxia, there is support available from local education authorities at school or college, university to help with conditions to make life answer. So try not, if you've got the conditions, try not to struggle and always seek support because it is out there. So, for example, at university, apply for the disability support allowance. Obviously, it's assessed based on your individual needs, which helps a lot. And at college and school, like if you can have access, if they can give you access to a scribe or a laptop or or a reader or something to help you during coursework and exams and in lessons, and I found that really helpful as well throughout my life. So my last thing to say is that I hope you found this video interesting. I am looking to do future episodes and I've got a rough plan of what they're going to be, talking more detail about some of the things I talked about in today's video. Last thing to say is thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it helpful and interesting, and I'll see you in the next episode.